Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. This is Samantha Hoffman, and one of the co-hosts. I am a co-host, one of the hosts of The Rich Life. So, and I just love that intro because I love that song. Many of you already know me through my blog, Insanity, a writer's commentary. I'm also the author of A Contented Mind and Chasing Nirvana, as well as the children's book series, Dainty Delaney. I'm so very pleased to be joined in this endeavor by someone who I feel is amazing. Her story surpasses mine as far as its raw, the reality. We've both faced many things as mothers. To be quite honest, a mother's worst nightmare. We've both had those. Hers is worse than mine, and yet she's persevered and she's used it and impacted so many people by it, and I'm just so proud to say she's my friend and my partner in this show. She is the author of The Return of Mikey, her late son's biography, which is an amazing story, and how she managed to share something so painful and still make me laugh astounds me. That's a gifted writer. She is also the author of Facebook, The Greatest Passive-Aggressive Weapon Ever. Very funny. And You Mean There's a Law That Says He Has to Be Attracted to Me, a psychic and a humorist explain metaphysics. I would like to welcome Diane Bucci.
Thank you, Samantha, and I'm so happy to be here on our first Rich Life show, and you are also an amazing lady, and I want to talk a little about my background, and I want everyone to hear your story as well, but just to give a little bit of information about me, I was married, and I had 2 kids, and Susie's the oldest. Mikey was a year younger than her, and we got Mikey diagnosed with autism when he was 3 years old, and that was back in the 80s when very little was still really known about autism. There was, research going on at the time, but we were kind of starting from ground one with a lot of the behavior modification stuff. It was kind of new. The prognosis that you got from most people, most doctors with that autism label was very bleak and grim. But Mikey's doctor, her name was Sally Rogers. She's still a doctor at the Mind Institute in Pasadena, California. But we were lucky she was in Denver at the time, and she had the only program around that was for autistic kids. And so we enrolled Mikey in the program, and she began working with him as well as me, and I kind of just threw myself into learning how to teach Mikey how to act normal. And that's a word that we use, normal. Some people think that, if you have a handicapped child that you might be offended by use of the word normal, but that's actually a word that we always use with the doctors because that was the end goal, that tried to get him to act normal, even if he wasn't feeling as normal as, he got different he had a different perception of sensory things and of people, conversation language. He just didn't understand. So I spent most of my life as a retail manager, by day, and teacher to Mikey by night. Mikey bloomed into a fine young man. He graduated from high school as the most inspirational student, and he went on to college. He got his degree in gunsmithing, and he got a great job as a gunsmith in Oklahoma. And I moved down there with him, and I was managing a store, and he got a girlfriend, and he had his driver's license, and he was doing all these things that we thought he would never do when he was labeled with autism. And at the top of his game, he killed himself, and he left a suicide note, and when we read it, we realized he was having delusions, and he basically had more like a schizophrenic episode, and he thought he was being driven to kill himself by demons that were killing him, and his suicide note was literally all over the page. But I had written a book about him when he was alive, and I was, in the process of shopping it for publishers, and it was a funny book. It was an inspirational book, and it was more like an Irma Bombeck book of collection of short, funny stories about Mikey. And then all of a sudden it didn't seem so funny anymore, and it wasn't so uplifting because here I was saying my son's a success story, and then he killed himself. And a lot of really bizarre things started happening after Mikey died. And I am very logical, very mathematical kind of person, and I don't look for signs. I never was someone who looked for signs from dead people. But there were so many weird things that were happening, not only to me, but to the rest of the family, friends, people I worked with, that didn't point to anything else but something outside of our physical environment has to be making these weird things happen. And I just felt it was Mikey, and everyone else did too. And I felt like he was really trying to show us, hey, Mom, I'm still here. I'm not here the way you want me, but I'm here spiritually. And I really felt driven to get his story out there. And so I added on to his book and, obviously put his death in there as well as his life after death. And it got printed last year, and it won the Irwin Award for Most Inspirational Book of 2012. So I felt a lot of gratification from that, because I know that book has helped people, because I hear it from people who've read it. And it's Mikey's story. It's not my book. It's Mikey's book. And so since then I've written 2 other books, as you said, that are more like self-help humor books. Kind of one of them is more on the metaphysical side. One of them is more on just basic psychology. But anyway, along the way, we've learned a lot of life lessons. We've loved and lost men, both of us, and we are middle-aged women who are struggling to find ourselves, and I think we both have. And we do a lot of counseling to other people who are kind of stuck in that rut and need somebody to say, hey, start believing in yourself, and good things are going to happen, because 4 years ago, I thought I was just ready to die myself. My son had killed himself. I just lost a man, and I had, I felt like I was just stuck in a career that wasn't fulfilling for me, and I felt like I had lost everything except my daughter and my family. And I'm happy today, and I've got 3 books out. I love to write.
Well, I don't know where you went, Diane. If this is on my end that you're gone, am I not here? I think. Well, let's see if she can call back in. Are you there? I don't want to talk over you. On my end, on the studio screen, it shows that we lost Diane for a moment, so we'll see what happens. Her story, like I said, is really amazing, and it tells you how much somebody can go through, and then it is a choice how you want to come out of it. She has more reasons than most people to perceive her world in a negative way, with a darker light, and she has chosen to go in a different direction. And that's empowerment, and that's the theme for today's show. And at times, of course, we always feel powerless. I know I do, and I know Diane does. But even in that, she was able to claim her power and say, all this was taken from me, but I'm going to turn it in a different direction and make something good out of it. And she has helped so many people. Kind of wondering right now where she went. But, okay, we will see what happens with that. This is our first show, so it's going to be just, I'm sure, monkey wrenches all over the place. I have all these buttons I want to use, too, that are supposed to be quite funny. I have no idea how to use them. We'll do that later. But let me get into my story, I guess. Many of my readers already know my story because I put it into my blog posts. I tend to kind of just reveal myself through that. And, here she comes. Here she is. And, well, this is really pretty.
Line.
There you are.
I know. When did I drop off? And I'm using a landline. I called in now on my cell phone. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I wasn't sure if, on my end it said that we lost you, and then I couldn't imagine how we could have off of the landline.
Right, I was on the landline. That's what I was wondering. I thought maybe you dropped off.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, who left us? So maybe if we both just keep talking, we'll be fine. But now we're back on and together, so we'll see.
Very good.
Oh, it's an entertaining show. Go get a drink, everybody.
There you go. It's some wine is nice. It's afternoon. It's fine.
Yeah, as long as it's afternoon. And if it's in the morning, just throw some orange juice in it is what I always say. So,
Mimosa.
I think we lost you, so why don't you continue on? And where did we lose you?
I'm not sure.
I'm not exactly sure, other than, no, you were recapping your books about the two latest books you did.
Two latest books are more, yes, the Facebook, the greatest passive-aggressive weapon.
right, which is very funny. And for anybody who uses Facebook a lot, they're going to find themselves in that book. It is so funny.
Oh, yes, and everyone they know. Yeah.
And everyone they know. And that was very, yes. Okay, well, what else did you want to say?
That was it. I was turning it over to you after that because I really didn't go into those books. I just said they're humorous self-help books, and I wanted them to get an idea of what your history is like, because you've had just as many heartbreaks, and letdowns as I have. You haven't experienced the loss of a child, but you've certainly experienced the threatened loss of a child, and so
right.
You know a lot more than most people do when you have to face the possibility of a loss like that.
Right. Yours was it was that instant hit, and then your life changed. You lost, Mikey, and then in many ways you realized you didn't lose him. When you have a child that's diagnosed with cancer, and my son was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, medulloblastoma, and when he was all of about 11 and a half, it was in 2005. And everything went successful. And you said you don't look for signs. I had many signs, and so that kind of opened me to that. Your experience opened you to the metaphysical world, as did mine, or my experience to my son. It's such a horrific moment, that powerlessness of, there's nothing I can do. I mean, my son's off in a surgery that is a day-long surgery. I didn't even really realize that they could last that long. But signs were given to me, and I was so grateful for that. But what happened after that moment? And he kept getting good reports. Everything was checking out. It was miraculous, actually. He went in, and I didn't know if that same child was going to be coming out. They have to list through. The brain surgeon had to tell me all of the possible outcomes, and they were horrible, absolutely horrible. And I was in the hospital and saw those outcomes. And there goes my son, and now he might be one of them. And he came out without any of those. I don't know why. I have no idea. But that was how but the haunting never leaves you. It's less now, 8 years out, but that's the part that accompanies, I think, when you have a cancer survivor, someone who's struggling with cancer, in and out of remission, or even a survivor, it's always kind of in the air. You wonder. A headache isn't just a headache in my household. It's reason for my stomach to fall through the floor at times. Depending on the severity. I've had to let that go because it was crippling. It's absolutely crippling to live with that fear. And at the beginning, especially of this year, when I turned 40, everything changed for me. But the beginning of this year, I really made a statement to myself, and that is, fear will not decide my fate. I'm not going to live in fear. I'm not going to look at the world through fear. And I have so many reasons, many of which you know of, to have fear. But fear won't help me. It won't. Faith will, if you believe in those things, and I do. And fear just kind of counteracts and prohibits that faith from really getting into, flexing its muscles. And so I had to do that. But it was a life-changing experience. A year before that, to the day, I was in the hospital. I had a near-fatal accident on my motorcycle, and I broke 12 bones, and I had a brain hemorrhage. And then a few years after that, I battled another bout of serious depression. And I think there's so many different kinds of depression. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But mine was stemming from a life that was so, I was so unhappy. And I was not living the life I was meant to live. And I really believe that something within you, when you allow it anyway, it's just going to keep tugging at you, and it's going to keep gnawing at you and keep gnawing at you until you go in that direction. And I thought everybody always told me I should write. Well, what am I going to say? What am I going to say anybody's going to want to read? I flipped open the laptop, and I just started. Basically, long story short, 4 weeks later, a very large novel was done. It flowed through me so fast, and I typed words I didn't even know that I had to look up later. So whether they were buried in my subconscious, I don't know, but the whole thing flew out. I didn't even know what the heck I was writing. One sentence, I didn't know. I read it later. And as I read it, I wanted two things. One, to become a career writer, and two, to have that kind of love in my life. I didn't have it. And something said to me, just like the character in your novel, A Contented Mind, she reshaped her world. It's time for you to do the same. And that was huge. When I did it, it was the first domino of a horrific 3-year-long battle, divorce. Basically lost a great deal. Still am dealing with that. But never once did I regret it. I didn't, because I felt I'm taking back my power. I'm not happy. I'm not serving him. As horrible as he was, he deserves a partner that truly loves him. I deserve that. I deserve to live a life that I want, a happier one, not one where I'm miserable day after day. And so the fight has been very, very hard at times, but necessary. And I decided to become a career writer and have been writing ever since. And that is probably one of the hardest careers I think anyone can do. Breaking into the business is terrible, as we know, and it's you take quite a few hits. You are knocked around a lot, and a lot of people are. But that's what this show is kind of about. It's a space for us all to kind of get together and laugh, and I do. I want to talk about these important issues, little things that we can maybe then remember later, but I also want to have fun talking about the quirkiness of life. I mean, life is freaking quirky, and not just after you've had some wine. I mean, it's just in everyday happenings. There's this, and why not? I want to notice them. I want to laugh at them. We're all these human beings out here. Some of us are a little bit more in tune with our spirituality, some not at all. Their journey just does not require it at this time. But we're all out here doing this thing, kind of, bumping along. I want to have fun with it, and let's talk about it and share stories. People have so many amazing stories, and there's some people out there who feel truly powerless right now, and I want to remind them, you're not as powerless as you think. It just feels that way right now, and there are so many people like you, and it's not easy. It's been the hardest years of my life. I grew up in an alcoholic home, so powerlessness has kind of been the cornerstone on which my life's been built. But I don't want that anymore. And so I've had to turn the ship around, and that has taken enormous muscle for me. But I've never been happier. And oddly enough, I've never been more at peace, even though on the surface you could say you have no reason to be at peace. But I am. I believe in God, and I believe in miracles, and I believe in life's loves. I believe in good things happening, and we're here to have a good life, the rich life. That's what I think. Hey, look at how I put that in there. I didn't even
I like the way you slid that in there.
I didn't even mean to. Okay, but just before we go any further with it, I thought it would be fun just to kind of talk about how was your night last night?
Well, my night last night, I'll tell everyone my dilemma here. I'm divorced. I didn't say that before, but we had gotten divorced after Mikey graduated from high school, and I've had several longer-term boyfriends, but I just haven't met the right guy yet. And as you were saying a minute ago, you finally get to the point where you have to say, I deserve, the love of my life. I deserve the career of my dreams. I deserve to be happy. And I think as mothers, parents, in general, we spend 20 years making sure that our kids are okay, and we always put ourselves on the back burner. And my situation was, similar to a lot of people's, where, you're the last kid graduates, and you look at each other and go, okay, why are we still doing this? We're friends, but we're not good partners, and we really shouldn't be married. And so it was very amicable divorce. So mine was different. He was very supportive, and I was supportive of him. But when I started breaking back into the dating game, it was very foreign to me. It's very difficult when you've been married just for 20 years to suddenly have a man come pick you up, especially if you have a child at home. That I just, I didn't want that when my kids were still at home, so I didn't date. When they were in college, I just threw myself into their lives and watching them at school and everything. So it was really hard to start dating. And I've had, several longer-term relationships that end up falling apart. And I kind of checked out of the dating scene for quite a while to really start figuring myself out, because you start looking at your life and you have all these failed relationships and you start looking for a common denominator. And I finally said, these men are all polar opposites, but there's one common denominator, and that's me. And so it has to be me that is the problem. I'm making the wrong choices. And one of the things that I realized, almost every single one of those men were passive-aggressive. And that was a behavior that I think I've fought with all my life. I must have an issue with passive aggression, and I'm always driven to be the fixer and make everything, right and sweep my needs under the rug. And so I finally determined that, I know what my problem is. I'm not going to put my needs on the back burner anymore. Not that my needs are going to be more important, but they're going to be on the same level as my partner's. And so I was very selective then with men I was dating. And I met this man over a year ago, and he was a super, super nice man. I mean, he's just salt of the earth nice. And I felt like he has the qualities that I want in a partner. He's intelligent, he's philosophical, he's always honest. And I felt hesitant to just throw myself into this relationship with him because I had just been coming out of another one and kind of a midlife crisis maybe, where I was just trying to find myself. And so I kind of kept him at arm's length when I met him. Well, he realized that. So I had met him through a dating website, and so kind of in response to my keeping him at arm's length, he never got off the dating website because he was just waiting any time for me to tell him I didn't want to see him again, and he just kind of wanted to cover his bases. Well, I finally decided, after months of kind of playing with him, going back and forth, I finally decided, I just need to walk away from this. And I did, and I really missed this guy, after we stopped seeing each other. So we started talking again. And I said, okay, I can deal with this. I can deal with him still trolling for women as long as I'm not, getting my heart involved so much. So I started going out with him just several weeks ago again. And I was wrong. I cannot be happy going out with a man when I know he's leaving me to go jump onto a dating website after that. It makes you feel inadequate as a woman, because we have a great evening together, and I'm in the afterglow, the reverie of having this great evening with a man, and then I see he's online on a dating website an hour later. Right. So I said, I just can't. I thought I could deal with this, but I can't. I can't go out with a man and really open up my heart to him unless I know we're exclusive and he's not flirting with other women. So I actually, instead of calling him, because he hadn't called me all day on Sunday, and instead of sending him a text message or anything, I went on to the dating website and I sent him a message on the dating website to tell him I'm sorry, this isn't going to work for me, And so I was surprised that I heard from him last night, but it was more of an icebreaker thing. And so that's how my evening went. How about you?
Well, what's funny is the dating website. The name of it and some of the things that you said are about trolling, which some people may not know what you mean by trolling.
Oh, shopping for women,
Yes.
I mean, it's basically keeping lines in the water. And he had told me that the first time we went our separate ways. He said, it's not that I don't really care about you, and he said, I feel like I was falling in love with you, but it's more of a cover your own butt kind of thing. It's like, he said, I didn't feel like you were ever that into me, and so it made him feel better if he was just talking to other women, so in case I dumped him, then he would already have this rapport built up with these other women. And so what I told him basically was, we're in a vicious circle now. I'm not going to open up to you as long as I know you're on dating websites. You're not going to get off the dating websites until I really open up to you. And so it's a lose-lose situation. We're never going to really give each other a chance or give the relationship a chance if both of us don't step up and say, okay, we don't have one foot out the door all the time with each other like we have been. And so I just kind of threw that out to him, and and I fully expecting him to say, no, I want to keep one foot out the door, and we'll go our separate ways. And I understand that if that's his decision. So I guess we'll see. We'll see. But speaking of empowerment,
I felt like, okay, I need to take the reins back here. I'm putting myself in a position that makes me uncomfortable. And as a woman, no woman wants to, have this great evening with a man and then see that he's online talking to other women right after it. And that's, I didn't think I was being psycho woman. I thought it's a normal thing. So, but it felt empowering for me to realize, no, I know what I can live with. I know what I can't. I'm going to be honest and tell this guy, I'm sorry to give you another false start here, but I really realize that I can't live with that. And even though it made me sad, at least I feel like I'm in control of my situation.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. I just wrote about, being true to you. And it's amazing how, some people just storm through life, And I'm not one of those, I'm not a bully. But what happens is then sometimes you stray away from being true to yourself. And even though you know something's bothering you, I know for me, I grew up with a lot of drama. I will do almost anything to avoid drama. And then I end up getting myself in a worse situation because I failed to just address it in the beginning, because my knee-jerk reaction is I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want anything to do with even potential drama. And it doesn't have to be drama. It's me. It's my scars, looking through the perception viewed through those scars. And so, but you have to be true to yourself, and that has bothered you for a long time, the trolling, and I wanted you to explain that because, trolling, of course, there's the kind with fish, but, are you being funny with, like, trolls, I don't know. It's just, when a guy is out screwing around, I would call it skunking around, so I didn't know. But it's, that never felt right to you. And when that happens, your body tells you, your internal guidance system flares up and instantly. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to end things, but something needs to be addressed. And why that's hard sometimes to do for us to stop and say, I'm valuable enough to address this. I know this doesn't serve me. This doesn't honor me. Something in this isn't right, and then work towards that direction. And you did finally. And so that's good.
Yes, and you're right about your body. Listen to your body, and I've learned to do that finally. If I have anxiety in my body, which is something that's very common for me since I was little, I was a worrier, and I would feel anxious. Anymore now, if I feel anxiety over a situation, I know that's not right for me. And just your intuition, shows you, okay, there's little red flags, or sometimes they're obvious like that was. Sometimes they're not so obvious. But if you start getting that sick stomach, that knot in your stomach, or you start feeling prickly and tingly anxiety in your body, in your neck and your shoulders, that is your body telling you something is wrong and you need to listen to it. Something's wrong with that situation. And I've been just like you. We don't want drama, and so when we get our feelings hurt, we don't want to surface them. We just want to pretend like everything's okay and not say anything about it. And that's something that, I know has affected all of our relationships, because instead of, making our partners address our hurt feelings, we pretend like there are no hurt feelings. And so you swallow this hurt all the time, and you continually get hurt, because if you don't stand up for yourself, nobody else is going to. And it's not like, all these men are wanting to hurt our feelings. A lot of times they don't know they're hurting our feelings. And I know you've run into that.
They're just such a different beast. We all are. There's so many things that are wonderful about women and wonderful about men, and terrible about women and terrible. It's just that's just how we're made. But there is something, though, when it comes to listening to your guidance system, is not being fooled, because your fear will act up, and sometimes you'll think, and it's not right. That's not an accurate. There's a difference between when your body's trying to say, hey, something's not right here. It may be you, it may be a situation, let's look at it. There's a big difference between that and that voice of fear. Because that voice of fear, will, that's the one that'll send you running for the hills, and maybe that's not the right approach. It's just trying to save you from, I don't want to get in pain again. I don't want to be made vulnerable again. I don't want to open my heart and get hurt again. And so it starts yelling inside of your mind, and that's different than that internal guidance system that just says, oops, something's off. Oops, something's not right.
Right.
You've been around people. Very different. Sometimes you might come in contact with somebody, you don't know them, and immediately you feel something peculiar. And that's important. That's your energy center telling you something. You may not know what it's saying, But I think once you turn your attention to it and you get more used to doing it, it's easier to read those things. You have no reason to fear them. That's a different. It's a different part of you speaking, and it's not to be confused with that fear mentality, because the fear is terrible. The fear can stop you from doing almost anything in your life. It can ruin the best relationships because you're fearful of getting hurt.
Yes, and whether it's in you or it's in your partner. They have fear, which, I know this man that I'm talking about has fear, and that's why he admitted it, and that's why he was still keeping his lines in the water, with other women. It does ruin a great relationship, and if it's fear within yourself, it's you subconsciously are pushing away that person all the time because you're so afraid of getting hurt, right? And they feel that.
They feel it. They may not even know what they're feeling. They just know something, and it could be that you're just listening to the fear. You're responding to it. And I know that happened to me that one night, that we called it the voltage night, when I almost bolted on somebody. And it was so funny about that is because I was so guarded. You've worked to help me get out of that. I'm a recluse, I tend to get in my little introspective world. And like you said, I help you go inward, you help me go outward. And that's a really wonderful team. And I started dating this guy, and wonderful guy, but my fear was I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And how do you know if you can trust somebody? My ex-husband was so untrustworthy, and I remember before going out on a date with this guy, and I talked to you, and you said, don't let your fear. I don't remember exactly what you said to me. You might, don't let your fear, determine this. Don't listen to your fear. And it was something along those lines, was it? Do I have it right?
It was. Yeah, okay. Exactly, because you listen to your fear more than your heart, and you automatically are going into it with a closed mind then.
Right, and so then I have this night, and this dear person asked me to spend the night, and nothing even physical, but just to be together. How sweet is that, But because of my fear, I even questioned that, the sincerity. And so I'm laying there, it's like 3 a.m, and I'm going to bolt. I am actually going to just leave this house because I'm thinking, I can't do this. He's probably just another one of these players. Nothing about him seems like a player, but your fear, it will really, really change your perception. And I was talking myself into it. Of course, I was worried about the alarm going off when I opened the front door, and I was just getting paralyzed laying there, and then your words came into my voice. Don't listen to your fear. Don't make decisions based on fear. And that kept me there. And I'm very happy that it did. It was important. That's different than that other guidance system. That was my fear driving me, and I almost acted on it, and it would have hurt him terribly, and it would have been for no reason. And so that's another part of being empowered, is choosing to say, what, I'm not going to listen to the fear. Whatever happens in the end happens, but I'm not going to listen to the fear. And that took a lot for me to do, but I did it.
Oh, you did it. I know. I'm proud of you.
And that very person, it was funny. I wanted to say one story because we talked about our night. So last night, I'm out to dinner with this person, a nice dinner. We're catching up, and we wanted to talk for a little while. So we pulled onto my property, which is a 40-acre field. It's open, and the car headlights, it's dark, are pointed out on the field. We're sitting there. We notice this white animal is running along out in the distance. And so I'm thinking it's huge, and I don't know what it could be. I didn't think it was a coyote, but... And so we're talking, well, what is it? All of a sudden, he gets this look of determination, and I've never seen this before. And he says, I'm doing it. I think, what are you doing? He whips open the truck door, jumps out, and he just barrels across the field, charging towards this thing. And I buzz down the window. I'm laughing hysterically, which was great because I needed that at the time. And he kind of goes off into the distance. I can't quite see him. Suddenly, this man is running. He's running for his life back in the direction of the truck, and he's yelling out, "Pepe, Pepe," for Pepe Le Pew. Apparently, this crazed fool decided to run down 2 skunks, and once he identified them as skunks, of course, he's running back and hoping not to get chased and sprayed. And I mean, it was the funniest thing. So that's the highlight, one of the highlights of my night last night. But it was that little
That
bit.
would be comical to watch. Yeah, that would be comical to watch. What did he think they were? What did he think he was chasing, if not?
I don't know, because, for me, I actually wouldn't have chased down an animal at night. No. I don't think it would have even occurred to me. The spontaneity of it, though, was nice to see. And you know what? He's a pretty fast runner, too. So
you found that out.
I learned that about the person. Oh, boy. What do you think, because when we kind of lost you a little bit, I was trying to talk about how with everything that happened to you with Mikey, my father grew up and had a lot of breaks. He had a lot of good things happen to him in his life, and he had quite a few bad things. He continually chose to focus on the bad. He felt powerless all of his life and battled depression. He was an alcoholic, and he hated life. He hated it. And he was a funny man, but then he'd had this dark side. It haunted him. And, I mean, as a child, I would spend nights talking to this alcoholic about God. And months before he died, I was on the phone with him for hours as he was telling me that he wanted to die. It was a very hard life. He, in many ways, other than maybe a chemical imbalance, in many ways he chose his perception. Those are the thoughts he went with out of what was handed to him. Now, what was handed to you, Diane, was really hard. I mean, there's many.
Oh, yeah.
When I tell people, when people knew my son was going through cancer, they almost didn't want to look at me because they knew. It was almost like by looking at me, would it happen to them? Would they somehow feel my pain? I was living out one of their worst nightmares. And I used to say to them, no, my worst nightmare would be to get that call from my child who's maybe in the service or somewhere, a car accident, and they're gone. And they're gone. That's your story. But yet you've kind of chosen a different perception. And I want you to kind of talk about that.
Well, one of my beliefs, my firm beliefs, is that none of us goes before God is ready for us. And I don't think that Mikey was meant to be on this earth longer than 25 years. And so that gives me, I think, more acceptance of it. I don't think that we all are supposed to live to be 85 years old or something. And unfortunately, I had one of my children was in this life, I say unfortunately, and yet for Mikey it's not unfortunate. He only had to deal with his disability and all the difficulties that came with it for a shorter period of time than a lot of us live. And so I guess I see both sides of it. I see, my angst and my sorrow, but I also see it was the greatest thing that ever happened to Mikey when he left this earth and entered a better life, because I have a very deep belief in God and in the afterlife. And so that's what really carried me through, because as much as it absolutely crushed me, I wouldn't have wished Mikey back, because I knew what a daily struggle it was for him just to get up and be around other people. And so it's almost bittersweet. It's like you're happy that they're happy now, you're happy they're at peace and at rest, but you're crushed yourself because I lost my son. And I mean, it is the worst loss to lose a child. But you can choose, it's a choice, it's a mental choice to look at it as, I'm just going to lay down and die myself, or I'm going to still keep looking for a reason for me to still be here. And so that's the choice I always made. I'm more of a glass half full person, and I was looking for, there has to be something positive I can add to the lives of people around me by me still being here. It's not going to help anyone for me to lay in bed for 6 months with the covers pulled over my head. And, of course, that's just what you want to do, when you're going through, when you're really suffering, and grief is horrible. It just, it really affects your whole body in ways that you never even imagined that it would affect your body. But it's like I aged in, 20 years in 1 year. But you just make that choice every night. And I would lay down at night. I remember the first, several weeks were just the hardest, because your whole body is full of anxiety. It's almost like you're dreading something, but it's like, what else is there to dread? But basically what you're dreading is the rest of your life without your child. You have this fear. It is fear when you first hear that horrible news of how am I going to live? How am I going to continue living? But I would lay in bed and I would think, you know what? I could die tomorrow myself. I could have an accident.
Correct.
You know, I wasn't suicidal, but you never know when you're going to go. And I would think, okay, if I die tomorrow, I get to see Mikey again. And that would actually make me have this little glimmer of hopefulness, like, oh, I hope I die tomorrow and I can see Mikey again. But then immediately my brain would go, but what about Susie? You know, I need to be there for my daughter. She just lost her brother. And so that was really kind of my impetus to keep going. It's like, I need to be there for my daughter. I want to be there for my family. My mom was my rock of support. I didn't want her to be worried more than she already was worried, you know. So you make yourself, you know, get up and get dressed and, you know, try to make yourself look sort of presentable and plaster a smile on your face. But, you know, a lot of times it wasn't a phony smile. I still found things to be grateful for. I still found reasons to laugh. In fact, one of my favorite stories was happened on the day of Mikey's funeral. My daughter and I did his eulogy, and we got through it really well, and people enjoyed it. And because a lot of it was funny stories we were sharing about Mikey. And as we were leaving the church, somebody said, that was a great eulogy. And my mom threw her hands up in the air and she said, I have never been proud of you. And I knew what she meant. But my daughter, of course, pops off, thanks, Grandma, way to kick a girl when she's down, you know. And my mom got this look of horror on her face because she realized what she said. She's like, I mean more proud. But we were laughing. I mean, it just kind of, it's, you know, gallows humor, but we needed that lighten up, you know. We needed something to lighten up. And I think a lot of people, when they're dealing with death, they feel like I shouldn't be allowed to laugh, or I shouldn't laugh because people will think that I'm not hurting as bad as I would. Everybody knows how bad you're hurting. I mean, everyone knew how close I was to Mikey. Everyone knew I was absolutely devastated. But if you can find something to lighten up about and look for reasons for you to still be adding positivity to other people's lives instead of adding negativity. And so it really is a choice. And you start, you know, saying, okay, what does God want for me to do with the rest of my life? And that was kind of like a big turning point for me. You know, I was holding on to things that really didn't serve me anymore. You know, I was in a career that I absolutely just hated at the time. And I needed to start looking at myself and going, okay, I'm no longer, you know, having to be, you know, Mikey doesn't need a caretaker. He had been very independent, but he still lives with me half time. And I suddenly had all this free time on my hands, and I started thinking, okay, what do I have to offer now, you know, the rest of the world? And I really felt writing was a way to do that. And so it was kind of not really cathartic for me. People always say that, but when you're writing about the death of your child, it's not cathartic to write it.
No,
you're reliving. Yeah, you're reliving the pain all over again. You really don't want that, but I needed to get it out. But I felt like he had something to offer people, and you just kind of refocus, and you just live with that pain every day. You live with that loss, and it just becomes interwoven in your life. You know, it's just like the loss of a love. You finally get through the worst of it, and it just becomes kind of a part of the tapestry of your life, and you accept that. And I accept the pain, you know, that life brings, because I think that's what we learn the most from is pain rather than the good times. And so I always look at the lesson, you know, it's like, what am I supposed to be learning from this pain? And it really does make you go inside of yourself and start saying, okay, what's my purpose for being here? You know, what was I supposed to get out? Yeah.
And we all have a. Oh, we're almost done with our show. We all have a purpose, and I know for me it was one of the scariest things ever to choose to become a career writer. Would I fail my children? Would I let them down? And then I realized, how are they ever going to learn how to spread their wings and fly and follow their dreams if I don't have the courage to do it myself? And here I am. You know, what level of success I'll reach, I believe I'll reach a high level, but you know, that's still yet to happen. But I don't regret doing it. Because that's how you teach your children. You know, you have to give yourself license to be happy. You teach your children through that, all of those things. But we got to wrap it up. We're almost done. Well, I enjoyed this, Diane. I hope you did too.
Thanks, Samantha. I did. I love you.
I love you. And I hope everybody enjoyed it.